Imagine this. You are a well-known actor in the 1950s who's been invited to spend the weekend at the estate of newspaper publisher William Randolph Hearst Castle. As you look out the window of your taxi, you ponder what the weekend will hold while staying at this multi-millionaire's mansion. You watch as the car climbs higher and higher into the Central Coast Mountains, the beach getting smaller with distance. After a half an hour drive up a winding dirt road, the driver lets you know that you've arrived at your location, opening up the trunk for the staff who are taking your baggage to one of the mother-in-law houses where you will be residing. As you walk up the front gardens, you can't help but admire the Greek and Roman statues, placed so carefully that they look like another rose bush lined up with its neighboring plants in the landscape. As you walk past an Egyptian sculpture, you admire the views of the California Central Coast, hearing nothing but the silent sounds of nature and your feet clicking on the tile floor. Once you've climbed up the stairs, you look over at the entrance of the house, listening to the oohs and ahs of fellow guests. Then you hear the voice of an older man exclaim, "Welcome to Hearst Castle." Let's meet our host. William Randolph Hearst was born April 29th, 1863, to George Hearst and Phoebe Hearst. David Nassau is a historian and biographer writing for The New Yorker, described how Hearst would take camping trips to the San Simeon estate as a child, inspiring the location for his future castle. While William would spend much time with his father at this estate, camping, hunting, and taking in the relaxing views of the Central Coast city, he felt as he got to escape from the bustling city life of their permanent residence in San Francisco. At the age of 10, he traveled alongside his mother on a year-long trip around Europe, where Hearst fell in love with the ancient Mediterranean and Spanish architecture. This trip would spark his love for classical art, and Hearst would end up buying one of his first pieces, The Fountain of Venus, marble copy, in his late teens. After his father died, Hearst would inherit his estate, along with his multi-million-dollar publishing company. With his newfound wealth in money and properties, Hearst decided to turn his favorite childhood camping spot in San Simeon into his dream house he curated while visiting Europe years before. With a combined love for Spanish, Mediterranean, and Roman art and architecture, Hearst turned his dreams into a reality and created Hearst Castle. With its extravagance, Hearst needed a good foundation to protect the art and intricate design from California's unpredictable weather and seismic activity. Who could complete this job? None other than Hearst's fellow San Franciscan and pioneer of her time, Julia Morgan. Born on January 20th, 1872 in San Francisco, Julia took passion for architecture and became the first licensed female architect in 1904. Morgan played a big role, not just as Hearst's architect, but as a creative brain behind the construction of Hearst Castle. Morgan not only executed Hearst's ideas, but helped shape them around the Central Coast weather, balancing his vision with engineering for practicality and aesthetics. An article written by Alexandra Lange for the New York Times states that Morgan spent most of her time building the castle on site, managing the fragments Hearst found in mostly Italy and Spain that were shipped to San Simeon. She engineered reinforced concrete and suspension systems for the two pools to protect them from damage during earthquakes. She also used cast stone and cast concrete to create the elaborate balconies and structural reliefs embedded into the walls and roof. Hearst and Morgan started construction of the castle in 1919 and finished almost 30 years later in 1947. Now that we've met the visionaries behind the castle, let's take a closer look at the artwork in Hearst's collection that transformed the castle into a living museum. It's important to note that Hearst and Morgan work hard to include as much art into the structure as possible, incorporating it into the floors, walls, and even the roofs. Let's start with one of the first pieces in Hearst's collection, the Venus Italica, or the Fountain of Venus. You can see it right here. He bought the statue in 1930 at Lanzan's, a famous art collector's auction. The recreation was made by Antonio Canova and as a replacement for the original, which was stolen by Napoleon Bonaparte. The recreation stands in the assembly room for guests to admire while gathering before a meal. Now let's look at another piece in the collection, the relief of St. Paul. This is one of many religious themed works placed throughout the estate. The limestone relief depicts St. Paul, identified by his sword, the instrument of his martyrdom. This piece was created in the 15th century, likely by an unknown Italian sculptor. Hearst bought this piece from Pedro Ruiz in May of 1923. Today, the relief is displayed in one of the Gothic suites, surrounded by other Christian artifacts. Lastly, let's look at the oldest piece, one of the oldest pieces in Hearst's collection, the sculptures of the goddess Sekhmet. You may recognize them being mentioned in the introduction in the garden in front of the castle. These sculptures are authentic artifacts from ancient Egypt, dating back to the 18th dynasty, around 1400 BCE. Hearst acquired several of these statues during his extensive collecting in the 1920s, fascinated by their cultural and historical significance. These statues now stand in the garden and terraces of the estate, constantly watching the views of the California coast. Hearst Castle is an extraordinary creation of a dream turned into a reality. Today, I only mentioned a fraction of the art within the San Simeon estate. Hearst's identity, influences, and vision for the castle was more than just a home. It was his chance to create a personal museum to share with guests using his collection. While the castle once hosted weekend trips for elite Hollywood and political figures like Charlie Chaplin and Winston Churchill, it is now open for the public to take in the beautiful work curated by William Randolph Hearst and Julia Morgan. Next time you're traveling on the Pacific Coast Highway, just north of Cal Poly, remember that hidden behind and resting just on top of the hills lies California's hidden gem, Hearst Castle. And here is my works cited.